the governor now coming to the podium.
Great to see you. Thank you so much. Oh, please be seated. Please be seated. We are live from Apopka, Florida, deep in the heart of Central Florida. It's great to see everybody here. We've got a great cast of characters here with us today, starting with our state representative, Doug Bankson. We also have the CEO of Freeman Global Holdings and the author of Economic War Room, Kevin Freeman, who you'll hear from. State Senator Keith Truenow. And then Representatives Booth, Yakorsky, and Tremont, and I want to thank them for being in attendance. And then Director of Propel Florida, Sean Keck, is with us here today. So thanks everybody for being here. We've got a really, I think, landmark piece of legislation that we're going to sign here today in a minute. And before I get into why we're signing the legislation, which, just so everybody knows what it is, we are going to utilize our authority under the Constitution in the state of Florida to make sure that gold and silver are recognized as proper legal tender. So you're going to be able to conduct transactions in gold, conduct transactions in silver, and we'll talk about why that's important. But before I get into that specifically, I do think it's important to point out how Florida, we've really led the way on protecting your economic independence and your financial sovereignty, because we've seen over the last particularly 5 or 6 years a coordinated assault on the financial freedom of people here in the United States and really throughout the world by some of the powers that be. We were the leader in the entire country in banning the use of a so-called central bank digital currency. Now, this is something This was something that was being discussed by the Federal Reserve under the Biden administration. What it would do is, so the goal of it is to eliminate cash, force everything into a digital currency. This would be one controlled by the central bank. And why would they want to do that? Well, they have more agency over your financial independence if they do it. So we recognize it as a frontal assault on your economic freedom. They were thinking about maybe doing something through an administrative order. We made it be clear in Florida that'll be dead on arrival. We will not accept that. And Congress really, I think the idea is almost dead at this point because we led so forcefully against it. But why would they want to do a central bank digital currency? Well, it goes back to other things that we have fought, such as this whole ESG idea. You remember this ESG, environment, social governance, this was very elite circles a few years ago. Not so much anymore because the state of Florida, starting in many years ago, we leaned in against this and fought back. And what were they trying to do with ESG? They basically have a political agenda, leftist political agenda. They know that agenda can't actually garner enough political support at the ballot box to be enacted. And so what they decided to do was to go to some of the major economic powers in the country and in the world, things like asset managers, big banks, all these different things, and get ESG policies put through the economy without ever having to go through a legislative assembly or anything of the sort. So you saw some banks debank people that had gun stores. You saw other groups not have access to the same amount of capital based on political affiliation. You saw them go after agriculture and traditional practices, even things like raising cattle, because they said that that was contributing to global warming. And so they wanted to do this through the economy. If you give the Fed the power of a central bank digital currency, well, that opens up so many possibilities for them. They think they monitor trends. They could say, you know, you've already bought enough ammunition this week. You don't get we're not going to process anymore. You bought firearms, you did this, you did that, you did a lot of gas for your truck, you did too much. And so it was a way for them to impose limits on what you could purchase. That's the goal of this. That's what would end up happening. So we were against that. We were also against ESG. Now, ESG was really getting a foothold in the management of pension funds. So Florida, for example, we've got, well, the market's had some turmoil, but I mean, we've got usually, I think probably in the range of $240 billion under management in our state, under our state board of administration. What they wanted to do, and they would have the asset managers would impose these ESG policies so they wouldn't invest in companies who the ESG ideology deemed problematic. That is displacing what's best for the beneficiaries financially in favor of this ideological agenda. So we were the first state in the country to ban ESG from use in our pension funds. We moved We removed $2 billion from BlackRock that was managing it. BlackRock is a massive powerhouse leading in ESG, and we did it. And now it's interesting, recently the head of BlackRock was asked, like, well, what about ESG? You were the main proponent. He's like, oh, he's like, no. He's like, you know, the problem with ESG, you know, it's become toxic because you got people like Governor DeSantis always lampooning it. But the bottom line is, it was an attempt, whether it's CDBC, whether it's ESG, to use the levers of the economy to control your behavior, to try to change society in ways that they could never get support through the normal political process to do. And we really are happy that we led the fight against all of those things. And so when you're looking at things like gold and silver, the same people that push those bad policies, they would not want you doing things like gold and silver because this gives you more independence. You won't need to be wedded to a fiat currency, and it really is very much in step with what we've been talking about in Florida for many years. So you have that movement to kneecap your financial independence that is being done through the economy. But then you also just have the specter of Congress and a federal government that has been incapable of controlling the amount of money it's borrowing, printing, and spending. And this has been happening for many, many years. When I was, I guess I was probably in college, the turn of the century, the year 2000, the state of Florida's, or the national debt was about $5.6 trillion. So we ratified the Constitution in the late 1780s. George Washington took office in 1789. And so if you count from there till 2000, they racked up $5.6 trillion in debt. They fought a civil war. They fought 2 world wars. They had a Great Depression. They had a lot of stuff. Since the year 2000, we've gone from $5.6 trillion to almost $37 trillion in 25 years. And the trajectory now is for, in 10 years, us to be about $56 trillion in debt. We saw what happened during the financial crisis when they printed a lot of money, and they said it was emergency, QE, and then they just kept doing it for the next decade. And then COVID hit, and they did the same thing. And so this is the Federal Reserve making your money less valuable. This is Congress with its borrowing and spending. And, you know, people will talk about, like, you know, taxes and this. Inflation is a tax. When your money becomes less valuable, that's no different in outcome than if Congress were to simply just directly tax you. It's less transparent, it's more indirect, but is having the same exact impact. And so when they do deficit spending of $2 trillion, and they say, well, you know, we don't want to raise taxes, and I'm not arguing for that either. I'm arguing for lowering spending, but just understand that $2 trillion deficit is a tax on you. It works its way through the economy. There's no free lunch, and that's what ends up happening. And it's a little frustrating. You know, Elon Musk went into this Doge effort he was getting lampooned. I mean, like, they're firebombing his Tesla dealerships. Media is smearing him relentlessly. His businesses suffered, all this stuff, because he basically said, look, we can't keep doing this, and we need to moderate and reduce the amount of money that the federal government is spending. And yet, we have a Republican Congress, and to this day, we're in the end of May, past Memorial Day, and not 1 cent in DOGE cuts have been implemented by the Congress. That's one of the reasons why we need a balanced budget amendment to the U.S. Constitution. It's another reason why we need term limits for members of Congress. But I think what you've seen with how, and I kind of said this early on, that DOGE and Elon were on a collision course with the swamp. And the question is, what would happen? And I don't think there's any question that DOGE fought the swamp, and so far the swamp has won. And that's just unfortunate, but I don't think you can look at this any other way. So this is hardwired into how the people in Washington are borrowing and spending your money. But it has huge implications for the viability of our economy, our country, and everything going forward. And, you know, don't tell me it can't be done. When I became governor, so if you look at, Florida's been a state for 180 years, if you look at all the debt that's been accumulated over our entire history of statehood, just since I've been governor, we've paid off 41% of it. And we're doing more every day. So that's not adding to debt, that's reducing debt. We have the lowest per capita debt of any state in the country, and if you looked at what your share as a Florida resident is for our outstanding state debt, it's about $400 a person. What is your outstanding share for the U.S. federal debt? It's like $105,000 a person and escalating. Ours is declining. You also look at Florida, we have the lowest number of state employees per capita, don't have a big bureaucracy. We are also the second lowest in terms of spending per capita of all the 50 states. We have no income tax. We have the second lowest state tax burden of any state in the country, and we're even going to take a chunk out of local because we're going to give you relief on these property taxes. We're going to get that done. And yet, even though we have reduced debt, run big surpluses, cut a lot of taxes, I think we've cut $7 or $8 billion since I've been governor, we've also done really big things. We have increased teacher salaries more than has ever been done in the history of Florida. We've done bonuses for law enforcement up and down the state of Florida. We've done things like conserve and improve our natural resources, whether it's things like the Everglades or Florida Springs, things that are really meaningful, not just to our culture, but to our economy here in the Sunshine State. We've even done massive infusions of money for roads and transportation. I don't know if any of you have been on I-4 where we did the temporary lane expansion, but it's cut commuting times a lot. I know these things work when people just volunteer it to me and tell me, oh, thanks for doing that, because we're moving better. And we've done video analysis. It's been good, and we have flooded part of our surplus into these projects because the state's growing and we need to make sure we get ahead of it. So on issue after issue, we're delivering really big things, but doing it within the context of a budget that is shedding debt for the state, that's cutting taxes for our people, and that is one of, if not the smallest footprints of any place in the country. So it can be done. Now, I don't think it is going to get done in Washington unless there's structural reform, like a balanced budget amendment, like term limits. I think the culture in Congress is very much ingrained, and I just don't see a massive difference in behavior from election to election. Who knows? Maybe we'll be surprised over the next few months. I would love to see that, but I don't think we've seen many signs of it now. So we have to assume that the borrowing, printing, and spending is likely to continue, at least for the short term. So the bill I'm going to sign today is legislation that is going to allow Florida to recognize gold and silver as legal tender in our state. And we have the ability to do that under the federal Constitution. There are only 2 states that have done it thus far. They're smaller states. We are the first large state to step up and to get this done. And this is right out of the Constitution of the United States. So this legislation will authorize money services business like check cashers or PayPal to transmit and accept payment in gold and silver. That means these precious metals can start functioning like real currency again, not just investment vehicles for the wealthy. And you notice what's happened in recent weeks and months. How has gold gone down or has gold gone up? Gold's gone up big time because investors are looking at this and they're hedging against, they see the bond yields have gone up. I think they moderate a little today, but when people start seeing that, gold is a place they're going to. So it's not just an investment, it'll be something that you're going to be able to use, and it's something that is very likely to hold its value, certainly compared to fiat currency. Now, we've seen the downgrade in the credit rating over multiple administrations. We've seen a lot of problems with the DC swamp. This is our ability to give you the financial freedom to be able to protect yourself against the declining value of the dollar. And so I'm really appreciative of the legislature for doing this. I think this is something that shows Florida is continuing to lead on a lot of the issues that matter to people. And I look forward to signing this into law momentarily. But before that, I want to bring up our great state representative, Doug Bankson. And then after that, we'll bring up Kevin Freeman.
All right, just listening in there to Florida Governor Ron DeSantis about to sign this legislation to make gold and silver legal tenders. He also mentioned the relationship between DOGE and Congress, talking about some of those budget issues that we've seen on Capitol Hill so frequently. Let's slide away for a quick 2-minute break. We'll take you back out to Apopka, Florida after this.